Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my week number 10 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season, going in depth through all 14 matchups of the week, from Thursday Night Football all the way up until Monday Night Football, telling you guys whether I would start or sit the wide receivers in all games. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 10 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Cincinnati Bengals at the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Ja'Marr Chase may have disappointed you last week as the wide receiver number 34, but there is zero need to panic. Ja'Marr Chase is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL, and you are going to start him every single week. It doesn't matter who he's playing up against. Doesn't matter if it's the 85 Bears or the Raiders defense, right? You are going to play him. The bounce back here is inevitable. Do not panic at all. Fire up Ja'Marr Chase as a top 5 option, as this game has all of the makings of being a back and forth high-scoring affair. Plus, T. Higgins is not going to play, so Ja'Marr Chase should see even more of an uptick in volume. Andre Yoshi-Vash, without Higgins again, we could end up seeing Yoshi sprout like a nice flower in the spring. Though, it could easily be a flower trying to sprout during a drought, and it doesn't end up working at all. Up against the Ravens defense, I don't feel confident enough in ranking Yoshi-Vash as a start, so I would definitely sit him. Trenton Irwin, if Burton ends up playing, he could end up being the wide receiver number 2 on this team. But the problem is, it seems like Jermaine Burton is nowhere near in the good graces of this team. The man was up playing slots the night before the game in Vegas, and he did not show up to a walkthrough where they were trying to make the game plan up against the Raiders to focus on Jermaine Burton, and the man didn't even show up. He does not appear to have high standings with the team at all, so Steve Trenton Irwin, the Crocodile Hunter, should be in as the wide receiver 3. He might get a catch or two, but he had just 3 targets last week, so there's no need to even roster him, even without Higgins. For Zay Flowers, he dropped his nuts into the mouth of the Broncos defense last week. He had 5 receptions on 6 targets for 127 yards and not 1 but 2 touchdowns. This week up against the Bengals, this game script has the making of positivity for Zay Flowers, a game that should be close, and they aren't up by a million scores, so they're going to feed Derrick Henry. Flowers has completely lived up to my expectations that I put on him in the summer, and I'm feeling very confident in a low-end wide receiver 1 finish for Mr. Flowers. Rashad Master Bateman is one of those guys that's going to show up every couple of weeks and have that top 30, top 24 game. But then after that, he vanishes into thin air. When you are only getting 4 to 5 targets a week and you rely heavily on taking a deep ball to the crib and you aren't the most talented player on earth, you belong on the bench. Now, Deontay Johnson in his debut with the Ravens played just 30% of the snaps. He will be playing more snaps as the season goes along, but as of right now, he's the wide receiver 3, and you could even argue maybe the wide receiver 4 if they don't put a uptick in his snaps. So you definitely can't get cute and play Deontay Johnson just yet. Next up, we move to Germany, the New York Football Giants at the Carolina Panthers. Now, Malik Neighbors started his rookie campaign. He was on top of the world. He destroyed every single defensive back in his path. But ever since returning from injury, he has cooled down. He was the wide receiver 42 up against week number 7, as if that's a team. Week 8, wide receiver 30, and then wide receiver 24 last week up against the Commanders. Now, if you look at that, he's gotten better every single week since returning. The volume is very reliable. It's very steady, 8 to 12 targets per week. So you should believe that a big game is on its way based upon what he did early on in the season. Now, Neighbors, even with the downward skid as of recently, is a must-start top 6 wide receiver this week up against the Panthers. Wan'Dale Robinson With Darius Slayton seemingly out with a concussion, Wan'Dale is now locked in to be the wide receiver 2. Now, I don't think anyone is going to sleep on Saturday night thinking, oh my God, I am so excited to play Wan'Dale Robinson, right? Because Wan'Dale Robinson is a floor play. He is a target hog that is not productive. But if the targets see a bump like we saw earlier on in the season with him basically getting 8 or more every game, he should be fine. Again, no one should be excited to play him. I'm not going to sit here and give this guy the gawk 9,000 special, but if you need a flex play, low-end wide receiver 3, he's fine. He should be able to get you like 10 to 12 points. Jalen Hyatt, even without Slayton, I can't guarantee more than a target or 2 for him, so there's no need to roster him. For the Carolina Panthers, Xavier, somebody touching my Leggett, has been a top 34 wideout in back-to-back games, with a touchdown in both of those matchups. Now, against the Giants defense, the matchup is good enough for the rookie to have similar success until the Panthers kick things into high gear, though. I don't think you can rank Leggett much higher than, like, wide receiver 34 through 38. Then they've got Jalen Coker. Now, I dove headfirst into the Jalen Coker bandwagon, and I got smacked like how Justin Gaethje got smacked by Max Holloway for the BMF belt at UFC 300, right? I did dirty. I was expecting some consistency. I was expecting him to build off of his prior game, and the log cabin that he built with the Lincoln Logs fell apart, right? So with no consistency and suspect quarterback play, there's no need to play him. David Moore might end up leading the teams in snaps most weeks, but Leggett has more talent in his fucking left testicle than David Moore, so there's really no need to play him. He belongs on waivers. Getting a bunch of snaps doesn't equal fantasy points. Next up, we move to the real Sunday slate, the New England Patriots at the Chicago Bears at 1 p.m. Now, DJ Moore has been fired. You're fired off of being a top 24 wide receiver in my fantasy rankings. He can be a top 24 wide receiver, of course. He's an incredible talent. He is a great wide receiver. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Savannah Bond, in an offense with a quarterback who can read defenses some games at the rate that Floyd Money Mayweather reads fucking Harry Potter or reads Green Eggs and Ham, you cannot trust DJ Moore. We have seen some solid showings out of him this season, but until Caleb truly figured things out, he is a low-end start in the wide receiver 3 range. For the other wide receivers, we got Rome Odunze, and honestly, you might be able to make an argument and say, Nick, Rome is the most talented wide receiver on this team. When things have went well, they have went extremely well for Rome Odunze. But as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. And with Caleb Williams seeing ghosts like his name was Sam Darnold over the last couple of weeks, playing Odunze would be crazy. For Keenan Allen, the old man himself, Unk does still got it. He saw 10 targets last week, but he only had 4 receptions for 36 yards. There are too many cooks in this Bears kitchen to be able to truly trust these guys. And again, with Caleb Williams looking like he needs a seeing eye dog to make a fucking pass, Allen is unstartable. For the Patriots, DeMario time with Demario Douglas has been canceled until further notice. With Drake May back under center, he had 7 receptions on 9 targets last week for 35 yards. And as a believer of Drake May and as a believer of Demario Douglas, I think that there are better days ahead, right? There is a pot of gold at the end of the fucking rainbow. But this is not a good matchup. The Bears defense, I get, Nick, they just got ass blasted by the Cardinals. I think they're going to look way better this week, and I just don't think playing any of these Patriots wide receivers right now makes sense. Kayshon Boutte, who's the best gambler in the National Football League right now, feels like the number 2 receiver on the team. But again, going up against the Bears, I can't make a logical argument to start Douglas, who I think is way better. So you're definitely not going to start Kayshon Boutte or Kendrick Bourne. And next up, we move to the Buffalo Bills at the This Is Our Colts, This Is Our Team We bleed blue in Indianapolis. Now, Khalil, Shakira, his hips have not been lying as of recently because in the last 3 games, he has had over 7 targets in every single game, and he has had 2 games inside of those 3 weeks inside the top 18. Going up against the Colts defense in a wet dream matchup, this has all the makings of a low-end wide receiver 2 to high-end wide receiver 3 finish for Mr. Shakir. For Amari Cooper, he missed last week with a wrist injury, and the team has yet to make it clear one way or the other if he's going to be good to go or not. He was limited in practice today on Wednesday, so I am a believer that it is possible that he could end up suiting up, with the matchup here looking better than Madeline Klein in Outer Banks. Even with the worries of how much work he'll get, how many snaps he'll play, he is a low-end wide receiver 3 strictly because of the upside. Now, Keon Coleman is another guy that has a wrist injury. The team is monitoring his wrist injury, as it feels like everyone on this fucking team, they formed a circle and had a nice circle jerk because both Coleman and Cooper have the exact same injury. Coleman probably will not play, in my opinion, from what I've read. I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, so of course that's far from a lock. Don't take that straight to the bank, but it doesn't seem like he is going to play based on what I've seen Sean McDermott say, and he said that this might last more than a week. If he does play, I would sit him. If he doesn't play, I would also sit him, but I will note that this will turn into Mac Hollins, the shoeless man himself, shoeless like Joe Jackson, so I do think that Hollins would be a sit as well. Dolphins legend himself. Before we talk about the Indianapolis Colts weapons, as well as the rest of the wide receivers going in week number 10, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friend star partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious, you will get a free pick, which this week today, if you're watching this on Wednesday night or Thursday before the game starts, Thursday Night Football, Lamar Jackson, higher than half a total yard is your free pick. So promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description to get that. Plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Now, if you're watching this on Thursday night after the game already kicked off, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday before the Sunday slate kicks off, if you use promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description, you'll receive a different player, either an NBA player higher than half a total point or an NFL player higher than half of a total yard. You match that with any other player playing in the NFL, and if they're not on the team of the free pick, so in this instance, the Ravens, you pick someone on the Bengals or on the Dolphins or on the Jets, and if both of the picks hit, you will get 3 times what you put into your pickup. If you do multiple other picks, they all have to hit, of course, but then you receive higher payout. So make sure you guys check that out. Promo code Notorious to get your free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So back to the Bills going up against the Colts now. For the Indianapolis Colts, Josh Downs is a no-brainer start. Now, Flacco last week up against the cold like Minnesota Vikings looked like fucking Deshaun Kaiser. Didn't look good at all. Downs, though, was still able to keep his head above water in Minnesota as the wide receiver 31 with 6 receptions on 9 targets for 60 yards. In my opinion, Flacco very clearly isn't the answer in Indianapolis, but he is the answer for Josh Downs, and I think Downs bounces back to his reliable mid-tier wide receiver 2 ways up against the Buffalo Bills. Now, Michael Pittman's a start as well. He has been hurt for what feels like the whole entire season. His back injury has been lingering, and he is considered week to week. But we also heard a couple of weeks ago that it seemed like they were going to shut him down for multiple weeks, and then he played just a couple of days later. Downs is clearly the guy in the offense, right? Let's call a spade, but if MPJ does get the nod to play with a bunch of teams on bye, Pittman is in that Amari Cooper fringe start type of range. Alec Pierce has taken a shot in the heart, and you're too late with Flacco under center, right? Anthony Richardson loved the fuck it, Alec Pierce out there somewhere play, but Flacco just doesn't have that in his repertoire, so definitely want to be sitting down the gritty man, Alec Pierce. Next up, we got game number 5, the Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, you can say all that you want about what Courtland Sutton has done for the season as a whole, but with a team that has so many mid-wide receivers outside of Courtland Sutton, he is just going to get fed. Back-to-back games inside the top 24 with 10 or more targets in both games. Last week, he was the wide receiver 6, 7 receptions on 10 targets for 122 yards up against Baltimore. This Chiefs matchup is far from ideal. No one's going to sit here and say that Courtland Sutton has a wet dream, huck to spit on that dang matchup, right? Where Courtland Sutton is destined to go crazy. But based upon the amount of volume he will see alone, he is a high-end wide receiver 3. Because of that, Troy Franklin, even with the shower narrative that Bo Nix and Troy Franklin played together back at Oregon, the Ducks, this hasn't meant shit for Franklin in terms of consistency. Fewer than 3 fantasy points in back-to-back games up against a stout Chiefs defense. There's really no need to play him. Devon Vell started off this year on the right foot, right? But now he's on his left foot, heading in the wrong fucking direction. Just 3 targets per game over the last 3 weeks. Leave him on the waiver wire. For the Chiefs, DeAndre Hopkins has returned from the dead like his name was Frankenstein, with Patrick Mahomes hitting him with the pack-a-punch ballistic knife, right? Because in Tennessee, nothing was fun about DeAndre Hopkins. Sure, you could still see this guy's talented, but he wasn't putting up fantasy numbers. But now with Patrick Mahomes, this motherfucker is kicking the defenses in the gonads. 8 receptions on 9 targets for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns as the wide receiver 4 in prime time up against the Bucs, while only playing in 60% of snaps. So the snaps are going to continue to rise like your cock when you watch him because of how good this guy's going to be in Kansas City. With Hopkins fully arrived in KC, he is a clear low-end wide receiver 2 at this point in the season, and you could argue him all the way up into potentially being like a top 14, maybe even cracking the top 12. Xavier Worthy is officially finished, with D-Hop being DeAndre Hopkins. Xavier Worthy, sure, if you need that jolt, right? You need that crazy upside play. You're real desperate, right? You're shooting from the moon. You can play him. Because in any given game, sure, he could take his 4 targets, get 3 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown. But with his targets dropping like it's hot, he belongs on the pine, and we're not going to talk about McCole Hardman in the Lord's year of 2024. You obviously want to sit him. Next up, we got the Atlanta Falcons at the New Orleans Saints. Now, Drizzy Drake London left last week's game up against the Cowboys early with a hip injury. Lucky for any of us who played him, he scored a touchdown before leaving, so he didn't completely screw you over. As someone that played him in basically every single DFS lineup last week, and I also played a bunch of Olave, I was down bad, but sometimes that's just kind of how the thing goes, right? The hip injury for London is believed not to be super serious, so he could play, right? He's listed as day-to-day, and based on what I've read, there's a good chance that he does suit up, especially since he did practice in a limited fashion on Wednesday. When healthy, London is a low-end wide receiver 1 or high-end wide receiver 2, so I would be firing him up. Darnell, here comes the Mooney, has ripped off back-to-back top 13 games with over 80 yards and a touchdown. I doubt he'll be able to stay in the flame like this, but it is Kirk Vember, and with Kirk Cousins cooking a whole lot better, even with Kirk wasn't playing the best, Mooney was a reliable wide receiver 3 flex, so with Kirk looking a lot better, I got Mooney as a top 24 receiver on the week. Now, Ray McCloud, I think, is a pretty talented player, and he's one of those low-target guys that will randomly show up and have a halfway decent game. But don't get cute and play him. The only way I'm playing him is like with a deep shot if for some reason Drake London doesn't play. Knock on wood, we obviously want Drake London to play. I'm going to talk about every single Saints wide receiver in the same way. Without Chris Olave, there is no reason to play any of these guys. One of them could have a good game, right? Because the matchup here is good up against the Falcons. But ultimately, why play guess who? Why play the fucking guessing game? With Carr looking more ass than Alexis Texas. You gotta sit them all. Next up, we move to the San Francisco 49ers at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, for the Buccaneers, Jalen McMillan missed last week on Monday Night Football with the hamstring injury. When healthy without Evans and Godwin, McMillan should be number 1, like Smitty Werbenheimerman Jensen from SpongeBob. I think I said his name correctly. That's off the dome right there. McMillan really should be the number 1 guy. The problem with McMillan is he can't catch. Can't fucking catch. I don't know what happened. He can't catch. He is going to be raking in the targets. And if he starts catching them, we're going to start talking about McMillan as this great play. But until we see it, I'm not getting overzealous and starting him. Trey Palmer, Trey Boo Boo, let's go get us a picnic a basket. Palmer should get about 4 targets, but if McMillan comes back, that workload can tip in the opposite direction, so I would just stay away. Same thing goes with Sterling Shepard. Otten just gets fed too much to trust him. For the 49ers, Debo! Without Ayuk, we should see Debo Samuel get more consistently high volume. If you know Debo, though, you know that the word consistency is not in his personal dictionary. It's just not his forte. But the targets should come at a more reliable rate now. In a matchup up against the Buccaneers defense that gets pounded from the back, how you like that weekly, Debo is a high-end wide receiver 2 here, especially since Brock Purdy has looked mighty fine like Sophie Turner in Game of Thrones. Juwan Jennings has been out for the last 2 games with a hip injury. Coming out the bye week, the expectation is that he is able to play in this game. Without Ayuk, at least in my eyes, he should be the clear wide receiver 2 behind Debo in an offense that is heating up NBA Jam style. Jennings should have a reliable wide receiver 3 game here. Ricky Pearsall, the man who got shot and he's still breathing. Slick Ricky could take over as the wide receiver 2 ahead of Juwan Jennings. There's a reason, though, why I say could and not he will. Because I don't think he's locked to do it. And I'm going to be operating under the assumption that he is the number 3 on an offense that potentially will have McCaffrey. With George Kittle, just too many cooks in the kitchen to want to start Ricky, even in a great spot here against the Bucs. Next up, we move to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the left. Hands up. Who are we? The Commanders. For the Steelers, George Pickens with Mr. Unlimited. Russell Wilson under center. The floor of George Pickens has greatly increased compared to what we had with Justin Fields under center. George Pickens' floor was in the basement with Justin Fields, but now he should be able to get you at least 10 points, even in his bad games at a consistent basis. Up against the Commanders' defense, this has all of the makings of a real rootin' high-scoring back-and-forth affair, rock'em sock'em robots affair. The upside is there for a top 12 finish. I got him as a middle-of-the-road wide receiver 2. Calvin Austin, last game out, he scored a touchdown on a 73-yard punt return, which was cool, but it did fuck all of my first touchdown score bets directly in the ass, so I don't appreciate that. That's cool, right? He got the touchdown, but with his usage being small on offense, and if you need to rely on a kick return, even with Mr. Unlimited under center, he is a no-brainer sit. Mike Williams didn't do diddly squat for the Jets, but maybe now in Pittsburgh, he can carve out a role as the wide receiver 2. We know the talent is there. But ultimately, can they unleash the talent with Mike Williams is the question. He was traded just a couple of days ago, though, so there's really no need to start him. Next up, we got the Commanders, right? Jaden, Stormy Daniels, and the Commanders. Now, Terry McLaurin has been saved by Jaden Daniels. For years, I've been talking up Jaden Daniels. I've been talking up Terry McLaurin, and for years, he's fucked us over because the quarterback play has been bad. But with Daniels, McLaurin is the player that I knew he always was, which is a top 24 wide receiver in the National Football League. 4 straight games inside of the top 21. One of those games was led by the Samoan GOAT, Marcus Mariota. Here against Pittsburgh, I get it. The matchup is tough. So I think the volume will be able to outweigh the matchup here for a high-end wide receiver 2 game out of Terry. For the rest of the receivers here, Noah Brown scored that crazy Hail Mary against the Chicago Bears back in Week 8, and he was the wide receiver 36 last week. If he continues to develop into the consistent wide receiver 2 piece in this offense with Jaden Daniels playing so well, that we're to be talking about him as a low-end starter very, very soon. But until then, especially up against the Steelers, I would not want to trust him enough to play him. Olamide Zaccheaus, Atlanta Falcons legend himself, and Eagles legend, may not even see a target, so you want to let him chill on the waivers. Next up, we got the cold like Minnesota Vikings at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, this might be a hot take, so you guys might want to sit down before you hear this, right? Hold on to your fucking socks here. But I think you should start Justin Jefferson, right? He's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL, and if you haven't heard of him, I would suggest trying to figure him out because he's one of the diamonds in the rough in the NFL. Obviously, I'm just fucking around, right? Of course, you're going to start Justin Jefferson. 3 top 11 games in a row. No need to believe the Justin Jefferson train will come to a halt here. Fire up Justin Jefferson. Jay Jett is the gritty man himself as a top 5 wide receiver option. I got him as a wide receiver 1, the wide receiver 1 this week up against a piss poor Jaguars defense. Jordan Addison Ray went off last week as the wide receiver 19, going 5 of 5 for 42 yards and a beautiful chef's kiss touchdown grab. He has been very inconsistent this season. Let's be honest, right? And frankly, if this matchup was more difficult, I wouldn't have the balls to tell you to start him. But up against the Jaguars, I'm going to be bouncing on my balls like my name was Stan Marsh, and I've got him ranked in the wide receiver 3/flex range. Jalen Naylor, I barely knew her, also scored last week with only a couple of targets a game, and with Hawk back, you got to stay away from Naylor. Brian Thomas Jr. not getting 6+ targets a week is a fucking disgrace for the amount of skill that Brian Thomas Jr. has. Especially when you consider that Christian Kirk isn't even playing. But he's had just 4 targets in back-to-back games. But even up against the Vikings defense, I think he should be able to pick up a couple more targets and finish as a middle-of-the-road wide receiver too. But I don't feel as confident as I would have a couple of weeks ago. For the rest of the Jaguars, relative of the tree chopper himself, George Washington, Parker Washington, looks good. Looks fine. But looking good doesn't always score you fucking fantasy points, right? Sydney Sweeney, she's beautiful. She doesn't get you any fantasy points. She looks great. So especially since T-Law has just this fucking erection popping out of his pants for Evan Ingram. He's got an I love Evan Ingram tattoo. You got to sit down Washington. Gabe Davis is like believing the girl that cheated on all of her past boyfriends. She's going to change for you. She's not going to go suck Billy's dick. She's never going to do that, right? She's going to change, guys. She'll be different. No. Same thing. Same shit. Different day. SSDD. Modern Warfare 2. We know who Gabe Davis is. And that motherfucker can suck a golf ball through a garden hose. So you're going to sit him. Next up, we move to game number 10 here. Shout out to Ben. Tennessee Titans at the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, it seems like the team wants Levis to start, which will essentially take the wind out of the sails of Calvin Ridley. Sure, Ridley is a talented enough player to perform with Levis, but the consistency will not be there. Facing the Chargers is far from an ideal matchup, but based on him seeing 8 or more targets with Rudolph under center, he's a fine high-end wide receiver 3. If Levis plays, I am abandoning ship because there is zero need to go down with the ship when Levis is at the helm. That dude would crash into an iceberg in the daylight, broad daylight. So no need to play Calvin Ridley if that's the case, but with Mason Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, I like him. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine has scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. And honestly, I respect the hustle, and I probably should start betting on him to score a touchdown. But against a solid Chargers defense with a small amount of volume weekly, he is going to the bench. Tyler, Boyd had 0 catches for 0 yards last week, which is not good. Even without Hopkins, no need to play him. This motherfucker hasn't been relevant since Jamar Chase entered the league. Leave him on the waivers. For the Chargers, Ladd McConkey has had 7 or more targets in 4 of the last 5 games. This offense has been slinging the rock a lot more, which has opened the door for better production from Ladd. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Abella Danger, with Quentin Johnston playing a lot better, Ladd is kind of just trapped in the wide receiver 3 range. Quentin Johnston, QJ, had the Browns defense looking like they had their cleats tied together. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 118 yards and a touchdown. It still, to me, though, does appear that Ladd's the number 1, but if QJ can get 5+ targets a week with how well he's been playing, and again, with the offense trying to throw the ball more, I do have Ladd ranked as a low-end wide receiver 3/flex play. Joshua Palmer might not be as hung as Arnold, but he did look decent against the defense that they played against last week, which would be, drumroll please, the Browns, in case you didn't know, 63 yards on 2 catches with a touchdown. But with QJ and Ladd ahead of him, there is no need to play Palmer. This is the first of the 4 o'clock games. Again, makes no sense that there's only 3 4 o'clock games. The NFL, they don't really understand their own product. Next up, we move to the Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. We're adding an extra S to the end because they're ass. Very simple, right? Very funny, right, Nick? A.J. Brown exited last week with a knee injury and was not able to return. With that said, the injury is not expected to be serious, and he was limited in practice on Wednesday. When healthy, he is undoubtedly, undisputedly a top 12 wide receiver and will finish there against the Cowboys defense that is more washed than Kevin Garnett on the Nets. So I got him as a low-end wide receiver 1, assuming he plays. While A.J. Brown has been down tremendous, Devontae Smith, the Slim Reaper, has been up. Wide receiver 7 in week 8 up against Cincy, and week 13. Wide receiver 13 last week up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Back-to-back games with over 85 yards and a touchdown. I am feeling real good about Smith up against the Dallas defense as a high-end wide receiver 2 to a low-end wide receiver 3. Jahan Dotson being traded for a third-round pick is one of the greatest heists in history. It's like when the United States got the Louisiana Purchase, right? A straight-up fucking steal for the Commanders, right? This dude is as useful as a hole in your head, so you gotta leave him on the waivers. For the Cowboys, the report as of right now is that CeeDee Lamb did not practice on Wednesday with the shoulder injury, but there is a chance that he plays. From what I have seen, it doesn't seem like a lock, but he may be able to go. Even without Dak, though, you have to believe in CD as the targets are going to come early and often. Even with the defense of the Eagles playing well, you definitely can't sit Lamb, so I've got him as a middle-of-the-road wide receiver 2. Without Dakota Prescott, Tolbert's value has taken a turn for the worst. He still has upside. With the Eagles defense looking better, I'm staying away. And if I don't like Tolbert, I definitely don't like Kavontae Turpin. Next up, we got the final game before the primetime games. We got the New York Jumbo Jets at the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Garrett Wilson just jumped over a jump man, last week against the Texans. This man scored the touchdown of the year as the wide receiver 2. 9 receptions on 10 targets for 90 yards and 2 tugs, going up against the Arizona Cardinals defense that is lubed up and ready for the taking. I feel like Garrett Wilson is going to make it rain fantasy points as a top 8 wide receiver. Davante Adams had his best game yet in Gotham on the Texans on Halloween, 7 of 11 for 91 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 7. While I do think we should pump the brake a little bit on the Jets bandwagon and stop sucking those motherfuckers dry, but I do love this matchup for Adams, and I do believe that he will finish inside of the top 12, and I got him ranked inside of the top 10. Malachi Corley should get involved more with Mike Williams shipped off to Pittsburgh. But ultimately, when you drop the ball on the 1-yard line, when all you have to do is walk into the fucking end zone, I don't think the coaches are going to trust him enough. And we might even see Xavier Gibson get used more than him, so you got to sit him down. For the Cardinals, this offense is just bipolar, right? Some games, they're hot, hot, hot. Some games, they are ice cold. So all you got to do is you just close your eyes and you just write down Marvin Harrison Jr.'s stat line. Close your eyes, don't think about it, go la-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da, and write his fucking stat line down. This dude has had multiple top 24 finishes, and he's also had multiple games outside the top 50. Against the Jets defense that's been struggling, I got him in the wide receiver 3 range, but I would be lying if I told you I had any confidence in him. For Michael Wilson, his value's all over the place, just like Marv, and there's no need to really play him or the short King Dortch. Next up, we move to, 'cause you waited all day for Sunday night, the Detroit Lions at the Houston Texans. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown has scored a touchdown now in 6 straight games, and I believe he'll make it 7 in Houston. Last week was a solid performance as the wide receiver 15, going 7 of 7 for 56 yards and a touchdown. He has been a top 15 wide receiver in 5 of 8 games this year. The Lions offense is off the chain, as the kids would say. So I do feel like with steady production out of Amon-Ra St. Brown, he belongs clearly as a top 8 receiver. Jameson Williams has been suspended for the last 2 games for performance-enhancing substances. A little birdie told me that maybe he had some Viagra. He was going out there with a third leg, Chad Ochocinco style, and the man's just on his way to he's trying to catch them all, Pokemon style, right? He's already had multiple other suspensions, so why not have more, right? And he is a huge risk weekly because his targets early on in the season, he was getting fed. He was getting peppered with targets. But recently, he's been like a 3 to 4 target per game guy. Now, even with 3 targets, he could rip off a top 24 showing. And I got him as a low-end start, though, because, again, when you're getting 3 fucking targets, how can you even remotely trust him? Oh, he's a low-end start. And by, like, low-end, I mean, like, one of the last 4 guys I would have ranked as a start. Mia Khalifa Raymond is about as useful as using a plastic knife to cut some steak, so you're definitely going to sit him down. Tank Dell, finally, had a big game that we've all been waiting for this season, last week on Thursday Night Football in MetLife. He was the wide receiver 14 against the Jets, 6 catches on 9 targets, 6 of 9. Very nice, I like, for 126 yards. The Lions matchup is far from ideal, but assuming that Nico Collins is out yet again, Dell is going to be the #1 target. His floor isn't the highest, but based upon what we saw last week, I'm fine ranking him as a high-end wide receiver too, especially since I think the Texans are going to be trailing and having to throw a shit ton. Sergeant Robert Woods will see more looks without Nico and Diggs, but with Stroud playing like ass, no need to really play him or John Mechie. Next up, we got the final game here, Monday Night Football. Dun 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 dun. My Miami Dolphins going up against the Los Angeles Rams in SoFi Stadium. I will be doing, like when you wanted it to snow, maybe you guys don't live in places where it snows, but in New Jersey, when I was growing up, you want it to snow, you wear your pajamas backwards, you throw your fucking boxers in the freezer, you do 7 360s before you go to bed, you fucking say a prayer to the weather gods above, right, before you go to sleep, and then it never snows, right? But that's what you're rooting for. That's what I'm doing for the Dolphins. I'm willing to do anything it possibly takes to get the Dolphins to win a game because I'm fucking tired of losing. And if you're a Tyreek Hill owner, you're probably tired too, because based on what we've seen this season, he's been nothing short of a bust. But with Tua Tagovailoa back, the signs are pointing upwards, and while last week he was just 4 receptions on 5 targets for 80 yards, that was because the game plan of the Bills was to take away Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and make the Dolphins run the rock and dink and dunk their way up the field, limiting the amount of possessions by both teams. And if the Bills get the ball last, they will score and win. And that is exactly what fucking happened because Tyler Bass hit a 61-yard field goal that made me want to jump off my roof. So Hill struggled. Obviously, he did not get enough volume because the defense didn't, they bracketed him. They didn't want him getting the ball. So here against the Rams, I don't think they're going to have the confidence to do that. I think Tyreek is going to be able to get open and play his typical game. This is the bounce back performance we've all been waiting for. And I know, Nick, you said Tyreek was going to bounce back for like the last 3 weeks. I know, but this is the week where he finally does it. Top 5 wide receiver. Big trust. Jaden Waddle, his stat line last week against the Bills was fucking hilarious, right? 2 receptions on 2 targets for -4 yards and a touchdown. He had a far from ideal game. He did lose 23 yards at the end of the game on the lateral. They're trying to do the Miami Miracle 2.0 Jay Ajayi style, or it wasn't actually Jay Ajayi. It was Kenyon Drake who just retired, but Kenyon Drake style. Gronk doesn't have the angle. You know what I mean. Everyone remembers that play up against the Patriots. It seems like Waddle's just never going to live up to his expectations, but in a game that could be a shootout, I think that Waddle's a mid-tier wide receiver 3. Odell had his first 3 catches as a Dolphin last week after being invisible. You can't see me. John Cena style over the first 3 games. I like Odell, and I think he still has some juice left in the tank, but with the team that throws the ball to the running back as much as the Dolphins do with Achane, on a team with Waddle and Tyreek, you just can't play him. For the Rams, Puka Nacua got mad, and he tried to fight the Seahawks defense, which led to his ejection. We saw a vintage Cooper Kupp game up against the Seahawks. 11 catches on 14 targets for 104 yards with Matthew Stafford looking like his old self. And with the Dolphins defense having more holes than SpongeBob SquarePants, I expect a high-scoring game leading to Kupp having yet another top 12 performance, and I've got him ranked inside the top 10. As I just talked about with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua must have been watching fucking Rocky before the game or something because he came at Tyrell Dodson like the Italian stallion came at Thunder Lips in Rocky 3, I think that movie was. This led to his ejection and Puka scoring just 2 fantasy points. So as a Puka Nacua owner, I was pissed. But it is what it is. We all know how good Puka is. And with this matchup being more positive than Jen A's HIV test in Forrest Gump, I am feeling real nicey about Puka Nacua as a low-end wide receiver 1 to a high-end wide receiver 2. DeMarcus Robinson scored 2 touchdowns in week number 8 and 2 touchdowns last week in Seattle. But the odds of that happening again are the same odds as a alien coming down with 4 titties from space and letting me touch them. While that is a fantasy of mine, it ain't gonna happen. Just like DeMarcus ain't gonna do that again, so you sit him. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you didn't enjoy, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It helped me out a ton. Make sure you guys do check out Underdog promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description to get your free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. I love you guys all so much. Thank you for all the support as of recently. I'll see you guys very, very soon with another video. Love you, as always. Good boy!